Oh,
Welcome everyone to MS Office Hours. It is Thursday, February 13th. Let me please introduce our hosts.
hello, everybody. My name is Heather Cox.
And I'm Andrea Sangrio. I'm super excited for our guest today to talk about security and all the things that they've been doing. And I would like to ask Nick Christine, our fellow colleague, to introduce his customer and get us started. Thanks for joining us today.
Yep, thanks, Andrea. So I have the pleasure of introducing you to my friends over at the University of Pittsburgh around their move from Splunk to Sentinel. And so Rick McIver, who has been working with us really closely probably for the last year or so in that implementation, is going to present to you all today. And so I'm really excited for him to walk you kind of through that path and really a lot of the success that we saw within our collaboration in not just the Microsoft and the University of Pittsburgh, but also with our partners and the like. So with that, Rick, I will turn it over to you and appreciate you presenting today.
Sure, yeah, thanks for having me. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yep, sure can.
Great. All right, I'll share my screen here. Everybody see the slides?
Yes.
Okay. So thanks for having me. Nice to be here. I appreciate it. Again, my name is Richard McIver. I'm a senior security engineer with the University of Pittsburgh. And Nick asked me to just kind of talk through the project we wrapped up recently, migrating our threat detection and incident management workflows to Microsoft Sentinel. So I'll just kind of briefly go over, why some tools like Microsoft Sentinel are important to us, what we liked about Sentinel and why we chose to go with it, how we address some of our outstanding challenges, what the current state of our environment looks like, and then I'll share some lessons learned kind of at the end. But first, just a little bit about me. So I think this will be my 20th year in IT. I've been with Pitt for the last 4, or just about. I came on board as a senior GRC analyst, and then transitioned into a security architecture and engineering role after about a year. Prior to Pitt, my experience kind of crosses a bunch of different sectors. So I started out in the private sector, but I've worked with a number of different higher ed institutions across Pennsylvania and Maryland. I've done some work with the federal government and the Department of Defense. And for a long time, my specialty was really endpoint security and vulnerability management. But more recently, the past 5, 6, 7 years, have been more focused on cloud security and more secure infrastructure side. So just a couple quick pictures. So this is me with Chewy and my son there. So got back from Orlando a couple weeks ago, had a chance to finally go to Galaxy's Edge. I'm a huge Star Wars fan, so that was a really exciting time. And mainly I put those pictures up because you might pick up a few Star Wars references as I go through this, so forgive me. So if you're not familiar with Pitt, and to kind of give some context into what I'm talking about here, just some quick stats. Our total enrollment at our main campus in Pittsburgh here is just over 34,000. About 24,500 of those are undergraduates. More than 7,200 staff members, more than 4,700 faculty members, 4 different regional campuses. And last year, or not last year, but in FY23, we received $1.16 billion in research funding. And last year, we ranked 8th among public universities in the US for research and in the top 50 globally. And from an IT security side, this is kind of what we're dealing with and what we're tasked with protecting. On a daily basis, we see over 110,000 unique devices on our network. We have well over 2,100 servers that we host across our on-premises data center and our various cloud environments. Within the cloud, we have about more than 206,000 unique cloud resources. And then our users receive more than 1.2 million emails per day. So just to give you a quick snapshot of what we're responsible for. So why are SIM tools like Sentinel important to us? And if you haven't heard of SIM before, it's security information and event management systems. And when I think of SIMs, typically, I kind of think of them as the engine that drives our SOC. So in an environment our size, you can imagine we have a lot of different systems and tools that we need to monitor. And all these systems are generating data We're a big Defender XDR shop, so Defender for Endpoint, Defender for Identity, Defender for M365, Defender for Cloud Apps, everything within that suite, that's all generating a lot of data for us. But we also have firewalls, WAFs, identity providers, various cloud and SaaS services, sensitive file storage. I mean, you name it, we have it, and it's on us to make sure we're monitoring those for suspicious activity and protecting those resources. So the first value of having a SIEM is taking all that data and aggregating it into one place, and that's really important for us, specifically for when we talk about threat hunting and incident investigation. If there's an incident and we have to go and do an investigation and collect evidence, we don't want to have to log into all these different systems, and that takes a lot of time and resources to do that. With a SIEM, all that data is in one place, and we can search across all of it very quickly. Excuse me. But with all that data, most SIEMs will also provide some kind of analytics capabilities to give you proactive notifications. So, we have all these systems. Typically, SIEMs come with some kind of analytics rules or detections that with known IOCs, indicators of compromise, that can send alerts or notify you if there's suspicious activity, or maybe there's an active event going on, so you can get in front of it before there's an actual incident. And again, to build off of the SIEM capabilities, it's important for us because it powers a lot of our automation tools, specifically our security automation tools. We need the ability to, when events are triggered, when events are detected, we can trigger automations to, go out and collect additional information about those events, maybe do some research on the IP, get the IP's reputation, get some more evidence to add to and give us more context. So that's all powered off of our SIEM. And then finally, to comply with industry standards and regulations, many of those standards require some kind of central logging tool, and so that being a kind of a key component of SIEMs, that's key to being in compliance for us. All right, so let's talk about Sentinel. Going to start kind of back, I guess it was late 2023 when we started looking at this. And this is just a quick look at where we were then. So we were had a pretty established Splunk environment that had been stood up for a number of years. We were leveraging Splunk Cloud as our primary log aggregation tool and searching tool. And then on top of that, we had Splunk Enterprise Security to provide those SIEM capabilities. So there's the two main products we were leveraging. We had just over 4 terabytes of data being ingested into Splunk every day, and then storing 345 terabytes of that data that was actively searchable for us to do threat hunting against. And the entire environment combined was a hybrid infrastructure. So it was primarily cloud-based, but we also had on-prem infrastructure that us and the security team, we had them to manage and support. So a couple key challenges with that environment, and I don't mean this to be like a dunk on Splunk or anything. Splunk's a great product. This is just the challenges we had at the time. The main one being I mentioned how much data we had, but there were large amounts of it that were either unprocessed or unhelpful. And when I say unprocessed, typically with SIEM tools like this, when you ingest data, if it's not coming over in some kind of standard format like a JSON or CSV, typically you have to do some legwork to pull out the data you need from the logs and do those field extractions. When we brought Splunk into the environment, kind of the approach was throw everything into it and we'll go back and process it later and clean it up. And of course, that circling back never happened. So some of our key data sources were processed and we're providing valuable data, but there was a lot of it that wasn't. And so because of that, those SIEM features provided by Enterprise Security, the Enterprise Security Suite, we really were under leveraging. Those features really rely on your data being normalized and fitting a certain pattern so it can run its analytics. And we just didn't have the data fitting what it was expecting to see. So we just weren't getting a lot of value out of it. Excuse me. Another kind kind of challenge that we had was limited integrations with some key resources. Splunk provides a lot of great integration tools, but some of the things we specifically used, and I'm thinking like mail flow data from Exchange Online, or just some various third-party tools that we used, didn't have direct native integrations with Splunk. And so what we ended up having to do was write custom scripts, have it run on a server, dump the log data down to local files, and then rely on the Splunk Universal Forwarder running on that system to pull it into our SIM. It was just a very cumbersome process to maintain. Something that I'm sure isn't unique to us, but technical debt was a big problem. I mentioned Splunk had been in the environment for a while. We're at this point in late 2023. Basically, every engineer that had worked on Splunk and worked on standing it up had left the university. So those of us who were left working with it, we were doing our best to learn it and to expand upon it as best we could. But it was a big lift. And then to go along with that, we had limited resources to devote to it. There's only a couple of us engineers on the team. Splunk was it's a very small part of our responsibilities, and so just finding the time and the resources to devote to it was tough. And then finally, cost. Splunk is a relatively expensive tool, and that was it was always on the radar with our senior leadership as being, a potential cost cutting, something to look at for cost cutting. So what these challenges meant practically for us. Our SOC and security analysts really relied heavily on those Defender XDR products for security incident alerting and management. And those tools are great. We rely on them, and we use them quite a bit, but they're all fairly narrow in scope relative to the size of the rest of our environment. So it really kind of had we had narrow visibility proactively into our environment. What alerts we were getting out of Splunk were largely from custom searches that we had built in-house based on past incidents and IOCs that we were aware of. So they weren't necessarily dynamic and keeping up with the latest threat actors and the latest vulnerabilities. So we were a bit limited there. Yeah, and all that meant we were limited in what we could see and what we could detect in real time. And we had all that data there for circling back and looking through logs and collecting evidence after an incident occurred. But what we were actually being actively alerted on to stop was somewhat limited. When we did have an incident and our analysts were going in to collect that information and collect evidence, all that unprocessed data made it cumbersome to search through. So it really slowed us down when they went in and we're trying to search through that data without the fields being extracted, so we could easily key off of them. It became a slog to try to get actual useful data out of a lot of these sources. General alert fatigue from just, again, unhelpful data. Really had limited opportunities for expanding on our SOAR capabilities and automation. And then finally, again, kind of the big killer was from our senior leadership. It was hard to show the return on the investment that we were putting into Splunk, given all these outstanding challenges. So we decided to issue an RFP to look at our options for potential replacement early 2024. We got a lot of good responses back, but very early on, Sentinel became a clear front runner. So I'll just talk a little bit about what we liked about it. First and foremost was the integrations. So I mentioned we're a big Defender XDR customer. Sentinel integrates tightly with Defender XDR, so all that data being generated by all those tools, all those alerts, all those entities can get funneled directly into Sentinel, and then we can see everything in one place within Sentinel, that we can correlate events with each other, and it all works very well together. Out of the box, when I went and looked at this the other day, there's nearly 300 data connectors that are available, and they're basically almost plug and play connectors for various sources. So if we want to start ingesting logs from AWS or Google Cloud, we have various syslog sources. It's just a matter of enabling that data connector, running through a quick setup guide, and then our data is going in. It was really quick. So that was very attractive. Excuse me. And then again, I mentioned automation. So it built into Sentinel, it leverages logic apps, which it's a pretty commonly used orchestration tool on our end, especially particularly in Azure. But it builds on logic apps for creating playbooks. So if an instance triggered, we can generate quick logic apps to take specific actions in response. And we like having that native capability. Out-of-box content. So again, I mentioned we had limited resources to devote to this. So the more we could get out of the box and show value with the solution we went with, the better. I mentioned those data connectors. They generally come in content packs with related sets of analytics rules and hunting queries and different workbooks that you can quickly enable once you have your data coming into Sentinel. So the analytics rules are more of your like proactive detections, IOC detections. You turn those on, and just some quick examples that I pulled out. There's built-in rules for WAF code injection attempts, malicious inbox rule creation, known threat actors and vulnerability exploit indicators for like Log4j and the Supernova web shells, the kernel tsunami threat actor. Those are all they're all provided pre-built for you, and once your data is flowing in, you can really just turn them on, and they start doing those detections for you. The hunting queries are more outside of those analytics rules for the proactive alerts. Threat hunting is for diving in and looking for maybe threats that have gone undetected or other like suspicious behaviors. Things like you can see the recent activity taken by privileged accounts in the environment, emails with specific subjects or embedded QR codes, files with no ransomware extensions, things like that. And then so you can pull that data out. The queries are pre-built again. A lot of them are based on the MITRE ATT&CK framework, so you can quickly see what's going on in the environment and decide if there are things you need to follow up on. And then finally, the workbooks. Those are the reports and visualizations that come along with a lot of those data sources to summarize the data and provide really great readouts, particularly if you have to provide metrics to your leadership. Those are very helpful. The tools that are built into Sentinel are tools that we were already pretty familiar with, so that was a big plus. And we have a fairly big Azure footprint, so Sentinel is just basically it attaches to a log analytics workspace and builds upon log analytics. So we had already existing investments in Azure Monitor and log analytics, so we were already familiar with the technologies, and making that next step to turning on Sentinel was pretty straightforward. It's a great feature called Unified SOC. So I'm going back to Defender XDR again. Our analysts were used to working in security.microsoft.com in that Defender XDR portal. But there's a great integration called Unified SOC where basically Sentinel gets added to that portal, and you can access all that data, all those rules, all within the Defender XDR portal. So our analysts didn't have to learn a new tool or didn't have to jump to a different location to take advantage of what Sentinel was providing. And then finally, to query the data and search through the data, it's all KQL based, which is the same query language that Defender XDR uses for advanced threat hunting, if you're familiar with that. So again, our analysts were familiar with the syntax and the language, and it wasn't a big lift to move to Sentinel. And then finally, it was proven cost effective, or it was looking to be cost effective. So I didn't want to provide any specifics because I'm sure it's different customer to customer, but our account team really was able to get us a pretty significant discount over pay-as-you-go for Sentinel. Sentinel it's basically metered pricing, so you're charged based on how much data you're ingesting into Sentinel. So we were able to get a great discount there on those ingestion rates. Some data from Microsoft first-party sources actually you can ingest without charge. They don't charge against your meter. So things like the Azure Activity Log, Office 365 activity logs, Defender XDR alerts, some entry ID sign-in logs, depending on what your users are licensed for. A lot of that data could be ingested into Sentinel without any additional cost. And for us, that looked like about 100 gigabytes worth of daily ingest that we would be saving. And then finally, Microsoft, they have a grant program that they're willing to extend to us to engage with a trusted partner to stand up Sentinel in our environment. So that was an added bonus to really make the decision quite easy. So we didn't have that extra burden of paying for those professional services on top of onboarding the solution. So that's everything. I mean, that's not everything we liked about Sentinel, but those are some of the highlights. But there are still some outstanding challenges that Sentinel by itself we didn't feel was going to address, and that's not necessarily Sentinel's fault. That's really all of the responses we got back from various different solutions. Kind of all had the same gaps, and primarily for us, that was managing costs. Again, if it's an ingest-based model, we needed a way, or at least we wanted to be confident in having a way to control those costs and control the amount of data going into the service. We recognized that data processing was going to continue to be likely to be an issue for us, given the amount of data sources that we had, and how just our experience with Splunk normalizing data and the difficulties we had there. We thought that would probably still be an issue. And then we had this issue of, noise and alert fatigue from unuseful data that we wanted to figure out and reduce. And then the answer we came up with to address those was to introduce Cribble alongside Microsoft Sentinel. And if you're not familiar with Cribble, it's an additional service that basically sits between our data sources and our destination of Microsoft Sentinel, and it does a lot of that data processing and handling for us. For us in this situation, the destination is Microsoft Sentinel. But if we had like a data lake or an S3 bucket or somewhere where we wanted to store the data for long-term storage, we could have Cribble, funnel the data to multiple places and have a data go into Sentinel, but also to another destination for long-term storage. So it adds a lot of flexibility. Cribble is kind of, at least what we went with, is kind of split into two different products. The main one being Cribble Stream, and this is really the workhorse of Cribble. It allows us to hook into those data sources. All that data goes into Cribble Stream. Cribble Stream processes it for us and then sends the resultant set of data out to the destination, in this case being Microsoft Sentinel. So for example, as the data comes into Cribble, we can create pipelines for each data source to do those field extractions, to drop those events that we don't care about, to really manipulate and play with the data and get it into the format we need it for the destination, and then send it out. So we don't have to do that. We can do that up front rather than getting it into Sentinel and then manipulating from there. And the other part of this is Cribble Edge. So if you're familiar with Splunk, on your endpoints, there's a Splunk Universal Forwarder, which is an agent that runs on your Windows and Linux machines to collect those local OS logs and application logs. Cribble Edge essentially replaces that. It's an agent that runs on the endpoint, collects those logs and sends them to Cribble Stream for processing. But what's great about Edge is it's all centrally managed, and you can organize your endpoints into fleets and subfleets. So we can have a parent fleet with a common set of configurations to collect like the OS level logs, and then underneath that have subfleets for different applications, and they will inherit the configuration of the parent. So and it's all, we can do upgrades from the central console. It just makes it very easy to manage our endpoints in a way that we didn't have with Splunk. So before we made the decision to finalize everything, we did a quick proof of value, and we funneled some test data into it, some of our more common data. And what we saw in the proof of value was a 45% reduction in the data that would be going out of Cribble just with some very simple processing. Stuff like, just removing spaces from the log data and just doing very basic processing. We saw almost 50% reduction. So that was very, very promising. The tools built in to actually work with the data, we found very, very nice and easy to use. You can, when you're building your pipelines, it's a very nice GUI for building out The logic for how to process the data, it's from top down. You can take steps to, again, you can add a regex string to pull out your fields, and then you can say, if certain fields match, then just drop the event entirely. We don't care about it. You can do all that within the GUI, and then you can have a side-by-side layout of to see what the result would be in real time as you're working with it. So that just made it a lot easier to work with the data versus what we had before. And then I mentioned kind of centralized management. Both Cribble Edge and Cribble Streams are all managed from the same portal. So they're it's all cloud-based. So very, very easy to manage. Oh, what came out of this proof of value was we're estimating almost $100,000 in savings versus just Sentinel by itself. So really, it made a lot of sense to do this, and it kind of paid for itself to put Cribble into the mix here, at least with our volume of data. All right, so with that proof of value done, everything looked good. We decided to move forward with Sentinel and Cribble, and it was a great collaboration between all the parties involved. So everything got signed and finalized because early August of last year. We engaged with Foresight as the partner with Microsoft, and Cribble. We partnered with Security Risk Advisors. They were all great partners. We all worked together to quickly get us moved into Sentinel, get everything stood up. As we were working through this, SRA and our team would work to stand up those data connections, create the pipelines, and get it ready to be sent to Sentinel. And then our team in Foresight would work on getting those data collection rules, data collection endpoints, and getting all that stood up on the Sentinel end so we could move really quickly and get everything stood up. And just real quickly, this is kind of where we ended up at a high level, moving from left to right. All of our on-prem sources are sending their data to a handful of Cribble worker servers that we host on premises. And then it goes through those pipelines, gets processed, and then sends out to the data collection endpoint in Azure, and then into the log analytics workspace with Sentinel enabled. All of those additional clouds like AWS, GCP, our SaaS providers, we have them sending log data to a Cribble cloud instance for processing. So that's a cloud-hosted instance of Cribble, and then it follows the same process, gets sent to the data collection endpoint and into log analytics. And you'll see here on the right, we kind of kept all of our Azure native sources talking to log analytics and Sentinel directly, mainly to take advantage of those free ingest sources. And this was the result after everything was said and done. We saw the 45% reduction in the POC. What we've seen kind of in the real implementation of this is more of a 37%. But again, I think there's still a lot of work we can do to reduce our overall volume and become even more efficient. We've been able to enable over 200 analytics rules unique to Sentinel. That's adding to our visibility and powering our incident response analysts. We have 17 logic app playbooks that are running, doing everything from looking up IP reputations and adding those to incidents for context, checking certain entities against known IOCs, sending alerts to Microsoft Teams for quick collaboration and visibility. And then we're expected year over year to save about $800,000 with Cribble and Sentinel over what we had with Splunk. So I think all in all, everybody's happy.
I'm so impressed. I am not one to usually engage during a security presentation, but I understood just about everything. So super impressed with your story. The comments in the chat are already coming in that this was an important story to hear and that they've enjoyed that. So I know my colleague will get it up on our YouTube channel pretty quickly so that we can share internally and externally with others. So thank you very, very much. Nick, thank you for bringing a phenomenal customer to National Office Hours to share that story. And to our team, we have had nothing but customer presentations for the first part of this year. And I would like to make that happen through the end of February. We have another phenomenal guest next week from another one of my alma maters, KSU. We're super excited to have them join and tell their story. But I need one more customer story to round out February. So if you would like to share your story like Richard has just done with us, please reach out to me as I'm working to schedule those. Don't worry, our product teams and our internal engineers are also ready to jump back in, but saving them for March. So I'd really like to hear more from our customers here. So again, thanks everybody for joining. I'll hand it over to Heather to close this out.
Yeah, thank you all. I mean, I did not realize it was KSU. Another Andrea and I have lots of alma maters in common, so that's one of mine as well. So very excited about that. And yeah, I'll get the recording up for everybody shortly, and we are looking forward to seeing you all next week. So have a fabulous week. We'll talk to you later.
Thanks all.